Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we've got a father-son duo. We've got world champion elk callers. We've got six-time world champion elk caller Thomas Deasing and his father, Tom Deasing, a six-time Best of the West elk calling champion. These guys own Mile High Note Game Calls. They're out of Loveland, Colorado. And it's going to be great to have you guys on. How you guys doing?
Doing pretty good, Jay. How are you?
Good, Thomas. It's good to hear your voice. And Tom, how are you?
I'm doing great too. Yeah, we're real excited about the upcoming season and getting ready for that and great getting ready to talk some elk with you. Yeah, thanks for
Yeah,
us on the show.
absolutely. I don't remember specifically what year it was, but I want to say it was 6 or 7 years ago. Thomas, you could probably remind me, but for 3 years I judged the elk calling contest, and I want to say that I can't remember, Thomas, if it was youth division or if you had just stepped up into the men's division, but I had to see who that was that I heard calling because I heard some cow calling that was phenomenal and it like stood out above the rest to me and ended up I think Thomas, you and I don't think we were on the same flight, but I think we ended up back at the airport after the contest and we got to talking and
Yeah,
and
I think that was in like
when was that?
2013. I
Yeah,
think that
and
was when I won the men's division that year, and then I think we had the same flight. I remember I had like the check because I couldn't check it on like the big
The big check that you
the
want.
big check. And I remember you came up and you asked about it, and then I think we had the same flight to Denver, and then you flew from Denver to Arizona or something like that.
You know, I
But
I take notes when I'm judging.
yeah,
I take notes, and I think I remember asking you, "What caller were you?" And you said, and then I pulled out my notes. And I started looking. I had all sorts of asterisks and stuff like,
yeah,
whoever this is, he really knows what he's doing. So it's going to be great to have you both on. First question I'd ask you, Tom, is what is it like to have your son enjoying the passion that you enjoy and having him great at it as well as you are?
It's just been incredible. He's been an outdoors person. I can remember taking him out to the duck and goose blind when he was 5 years old, Jay. And, I started him out with a little BB gun in the blind, and it was a great way to start a young person for safety and just pointing the gun in the right direction and everything. And he would, I knew I had a winner when he wouldn't complain about the cold or anything. The only thing he did was watch me and learn and over the years it's just been so wonderful. And even my daughter Jessie, who's not with us today, she's won the national contest twice in the women's division, and she loves the call and she loves the outdoors. So it's just been great having an outdoor family, and it doesn't get any better.
Yeah, I can remember. It was really cool. I forgot about your daughter. She was a phenomenal caller as well. And is she still elk hunting, still calling, doing her thing?
Well, she just had a baby, so that's slowing her down a little bit. She got married, and her husband just got back from being deployed. So then they had their baby, and so she's got a lot of other priorities going on right now. But I'm hoping she'll get back into it here in the next year or so.
That sounds good. That sounds good. You guys have Mile High Note game calls. Tell me a little bit about what created the desire to want to create your own calls. I think I know the answer, but I want to hear it from you guys.
Sure. So, I've been calling competitively, geez, I'm going to say for 25 years now, just on little contests and big contests and stuff. And one of the things that always kind of got to me was I would settle in on a call that I really liked, and I'd go buy that call, and I'd break it in and I'd get it just the way I wanted it. And then it would wear out and I'd go buy the same call, and I'd struggle with consistency in the manufacturing process. And it just got frustrating. So I bought the equipment just to make my own calls, just for myself, so I could really get a consistent call. Of course, I didn't realize how hard it was going to be to actually figure out the recipes on these calls, and with all the thicknesses of latex and the latex stretch. But once I got those dialed in, I just started getting the consistency I was looking for, because I was hand making every call. And then I started kind of giving them out to people, and they really liked them, and they just were encouraging me to take it to the next step. And that's kind of how we started it out.
So, in other words, the three of you, the two, Thomas and Tom, and your daughter, you're basically getting firsthand feedback. I mean, you can hand Thomas a call, and he can give you feedback right away, as well as your daughter. And tell me what kind of, how that played into the success of your calling company.
It really did play in a big way. Just having these guys here as good callers. I was popping reads off of the press and handing them to them, and they're like, nope, they would know right away, this isn't it. And and then we were getting close, but then we would hear some things we didn't like in it, so I would just tweak the stretch a little bit more, try a different thickness of latex and see where that went. I literally probably made 1,000 calls in that time, just in R&D, trying to figure out what the right recipe was for the calls for us.
Yeah, for sure. And for the listeners out there, for those that do call a lot and those that maybe don't, a couple things you said right there are very, very important, and that's latex thickness and consistency and the stretch. And everybody blows a call differently, whether you're blowing a duck call, a turkey call, a goose call, an elk call, whatever. I would think one of the challenges as a manufacturer would be trying to make calls that work well for you first, so that you can demonstrate your own calls. But then also, since everybody's mouth's a little different, everybody likes, like personally, I like cow calling. I like a real loose latex. And a lot of people, they can't even get a sound out of real loose latex. So talk about the challenges a little bit with everybody's mouth and everybody having their own style and such as a manufacturer.
Yeah, one of the things that I run into a lot, I do a lot of elk calling instruction also. I run some classes out of my house, and, I get probably 20 to 30 guys in every year that I'm just working with on the reeds. And the placement is so important in the mouth, and it kind of starts there. And sometimes I get guys in that have a real narrow palate plate kind of up there in the roof of their mouth, and the traditional diaphragm doesn't fit real good in their mouth, and then they'll really struggle with the call. So, there are some slimline calls out there that you can get, and I usually refer them to a few other manufacturers, because I don't make one yet. I am going to start making one next year, I think, because I've had so many requests for it. But, it's really important that it fits in the mouth really well. And then, like you said, the stretch of latex, you're right, people like it from real loose to real tight. And, we make our calls pretty tight. And one of the reasons I do that is because I'm really trying to appeal to the beginner caller, especially the person that's really struggled. And what we've found is the tighter the latex, the easier it is to work. You don't have to use much air or pressure, and you get a sound right away. And, and that's the big deal for these guys that are coming in and learning, because they want to be able to make a sound, and they want to be able to start somewhere. And some of them are really struggling, not even making noise when they come see me. So, but we've found that we really like the tightness of the latex, and it just makes the call last a little longer, I think, too, because it's tight to begin with. And, even when it starts getting a little wrinkled and worn out, we can still make them sound good. And so, I think we get a better starting base with that tight stretch.
For sure. And I think with a tight stretch, you can immediately be making high-pitched sounds, specifically talking about bugles, where if you have a looser stretch, you're going to require more air pressure, like you said. And
right.
I think from a bugling standpoint, the tighter stretch, I'm going to ask you guys, what, does your cow call differ from your call that you bugle with as far as stretch, or do you use one call for everything?
I generally use one call for everything. I'll bring the single reed, double reed, and triple reed with me when I'm hunting, just to mix it up a little bit because they all do sound just a little different. But generally, I have one call that I use the whole time. And that's when it all just comes down to pressure from your tongue. I've found anyway, like the more pressure you put, obviously the higher it's going to go. Lower pressure, the lower the pitch can go. So I can get a wide range of calls. I use the triple reed a lot for our calls here. And I've found, I can wail on it. I can get that high pitch for a cow, and I can get that low pitch for a cow. And then I can also bugle with it and not have to worry about transferring calls. But
Yeah, and it's always nice to have one that you don't have to switch calls out and that you can be versatile with. And most of the really good callers like you guys, you can use one call for everything. How does that differ on the stage? Because most of the time on the stage, they're having you do bull calls and then they're having you do cow calls. In that situation, will you actually switch calls, or will you, if you have one that's running good, you'll just use the same call?
in the past, to tell you the truth, I've always just used one call. Um, every once in a while, I'll switch from like a triple to a single reed just because they will sound a lot different. The single reed's kind of a little bit more subtle, and the triple reed, like I said, it can get really loud. But generally, I honestly just use the one, and that way, it doesn't take any time to switch them because every little minute, every little second matters. So you
Yeah,
don't get a lot
those
of
30
time.
seconds took off pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And it's one thing I always admired about your calling, Thomas. It seemed like everybody had their bags of calls and they had all their, they had their whole bag. They come up and you would walk up with your baseball cap, just walk up with your bugle tube, one call and just let her rip. And it was pretty cool. Everybody's switching calls in and out, and Thomas is always just running one call and, you know, 6-time world champion. It's pretty cool.
Jay, I don't even know if you remember if you were around when Thomas was doing the voice division, but he used to be able to lay it down pretty good just with his voice, better than most people could do with a reed. It was pretty impressive. He won that division, I think, 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
But then he hit puberty and it was all over. But
I think that's leads me into a great question of being a good voice caller, even when you were a kid, even though maybe you can't make some of those sounds because your voice has changed. It brings in your throaty. It brings in a whole level of realism. Just curious if you guys would speak to that. Being a good voice caller, how has it helped you become, putting a diaphragm in your mouth and carrying that on and being a great elk caller?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it helped out a lot. I remember the first time I didn't call with my voice. It was the ISC show in Denver. Oh, I was probably, I don't know, 15. And I think I was actually sick. And I'd never touched a reed before. And my dad was like, well, here, go ahead and give the contest a try and see if you can make some noises with the reed. And I was able to basically bugle alongside with the reed. Since I was sick, I couldn't get the high-pitched voice or the high-pitched notes. But I remember throwing that reed in and going on stage, and I think I actually won the men's division. And it was the first time I ever used a reed. And, and so then I started, playing with the reed more. But yeah, like you said, being able to, because all the noises do not come from the reed. I mean, that just gets you, the high-pitched noises that you can't make with your own voice. But definitely with the cow calls, I'll work in kind of a raspy, like back of the throat noise that you use. And same with the bugles. Like when you're ending the bugle, like you get that high pitch from the reed, and then when you're ending it, you kind of use your voice, use a deeper noise that comes from, your chest, and kind of end it with that. And with the grunts too, grunting a lot of it honestly comes from your voice. Everybody's grunts sound a little different just because everybody's voice is a little different. When you hear the woman callers versus the men callers, like the men's division and women's division, Even then, you can tell a little bit of a difference just because generally a woman's voice isn't as deep as a man's. So you can tell we're using a lot of voice in the calls as well.
For sure. Let's take a quick break here, then I want to dive in and have you guys demonstrate some calls here. GoHunt.com Insider is by far the most valuable tool a Western hunter could give themselves. GoHunt.com Insider are the industry leaders and #1 source for Western hunting for a lot of reasons. GoHunt.com Insider have changed the game for how hunts and hunting information are found. Within a matter of minutes using Filtering 2.0, you'll be able to filter by state, species, residency, odds of drawing a tag, specific hunting dates, and harvest success percentages to find the hunts that fit exactly what you're looking for. If you are a guy that applies across the West or just in your home state but want to find some new opportunity, there's no better way to do it than using GoHunt.com Insider. As an exclusive offer to my listeners, if you sign up for a GoHunt.com Insider membership for $149 a year and use the promo code JScott at checkout, you'll receive a $50 KUIU gift card. Head on over to GoHunt.com/insider and get yourself the most valuable membership a hunter could have. Okay, guys, I want to have you both demonstrate some calls, and you pick it whether we start out with some bugles and, go through some chuckles and grunts and what have you, or if you want to start with cow calling. But maybe, one of you start and kind of run through a little bit of a series, and then maybe the other one kind of do the same type of series, and we'll just kind of go through the calls, and the listeners will kind of get to hear. And if I see any places where I've got questions about, certain sounds you're making or what have you, I'll just interject there.
Okay. Sounds good. I think maybe we'll just go in order of our calls, and we can just start out with our single read, work up to the triple read maybe, and then we can demonstrate each one that way.
That sounds great.
So I'll go ahead and demonstrate the single read, and it's called the Contender. Our call is a single read Contender. Very easy read to blow, just that one single piece of latex, but you can use it for everything: cow calling, bull sounds. So I'll just do some basic cow calls with it. So you can see, you can get, some different sounds. You can do some high calf sounds and some regular cow sounds, a little bit of some estrus sounds in your mews there. One of the things I saw you mewing the other day, Jay, on one of your posts on Facebook, I think it was, and you were doing a really cool little estrus sound that sounded like it was coming from the back of your throat. That was a pretty cool sound you were making.
That little buzz, to me, gives it a little bit of realism where, I think if you can do that, not all the time, but if you can throw it in every once in a while, for me, it kind of makes a difference, I think, between, being spot on and perfect as far as real and not. And, so, yeah, I'm curious about that call, Tom. That's your single. That's your Contender.
Right.
Is the single stretched any different than the double and the triple, or do you run pretty much the same stretch as just a one-piece latex?
It's stretched just a little bit different. There's not a huge amount of difference, but there is a difference, and the latex is different. My single's going to be a little thicker latex than the rest of my calls. Okay. And I do stretch it a little tighter too, but the other calls are just under it by a few, really, I don't know, 1/100th of a stretch. But the single by itself is just a little bit thicker piece of latex, and and that way I can still have control with some light calf and cow sounds. Plus, I can still bugle with it without it cutting out.
Sure.
Let me go ahead and demonstrate a couple bugles here.
call later.
So you can see that even though it's just a single a single piece of latex stretched real tight, you can still even get the deep grunts and the deep chuckles with the call. And we didn't talk much about our custom grunt tube, but we're real proud of that too, and we've designed that, and I think that really adds to the realism of the call.
I have the tube actually here in my hand, and I've been messing with it, and it's really good. I don't know. I haven't taken the cover off this thing to see what you boys have been doing, but there's definitely something going on in this tube for sure. I really like it. Are you both running this tube?
Yeah, yep.
Cool.
And what we did, one of the things we did is we dropped a canal in the middle of the tube that kind of creates two chambers inside there. And we dropped a little rubber gasket in to cut the vibration down a little bit, to cut some of that plastic sound out that you hear on some tubes. But those two like inline acoustic chambers, we're just really happy with them. And we've used a really hard plastic on it. So it really generates a lot of amplified sounds and stuff. So that's how we're really getting that nice, and that first chamber really builds a lot of back pressure for grunting and stuff. So
yeah, I've been using this, and I really like this tube for sure.
So Thomas is gonna talk a little bit. Or you want to do the double read, or I'll do the double read real quick. Thomas doesn't have his with him, but the double read was really for years my go-to read. I used this in contest calling. I used it in hunting situations for the most part. But I'll tell you, ever since I tweaked my recipe on my single reed contender, that's kind of becoming my favorite call, just because it's so easy to blow and so easy to use. But let me demonstrate this double here real quick. And this is called the Rival, and it's our green reed. So those are some of the sounds that we're getting from the Rival reed and some of the cow call stuff, and a couple estrus wines there mixed in there. And I've had a lot of luck with the estrus wine on bulls that hang up out there about 60 or 70 yards. I'll hit them with that estrus wine a lot of times, and boy, that makes a huge difference.
You guys hunt primarily Colorado over-the-counter units. You obviously try and put in for the limited entry stuff when you can. But talk a little bit about, the units that are over the counter. Obviously, they get quite a bit of pressure, do they not?
Yeah, they do. They really get a lot of pressure. And one of our favorite units that we hunt, it gets just hammered during rifle season, and during muzzleloader, there's a lot of hunters running around the bow season. We try to get back into these areas farther than a lot of people like to go. We'll go back in 4 or 5 miles and try to get away from people and stuff. But, a lot of these elk have been called to a lot. And our philosophy kind of is the most realistic sound that you can make, the better off you are with these elk. You want to really be able to fool them. And, we do a lot of cow calling, and but I do a lot of excited cow calling. I don't just sit in the woods and chirp a few times. I mean, we have some routines that we like to do, and it's really produced a lot of success for us over the years.
When do you find, the season's going to open here in about 2 weeks, right at the end of August? When do you find that the bugling and the response to calls as far as the bulls actually bugling and coming in real hot. If you had to pick a week in Colorado year after year, which week is it?
Oh, I'd say probably the third week of archery, which would be around muzzleloader season.
So around the 10th?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's first 2 weeks. I mean, it's been pretty hot the past few years. You don't get a lot of responses, but it doesn't mean that we don't call. That first week we'll still call like we would in the third week. And a lot of times we won't get responses, but we'll call elk in just because they're more curious about, what's going on and why they're bugling already or why they're, getting all worked up.
And one of the things, that I'll add to that is, a lot of guys, that first weekend of archery season, when you're out there, a lot of guys won't bugle a lot because they know they're not going to get answers from bulls. It's just warm and the bulls aren't really even rutting yet too much. And, even a lot of the satellites are still in little bachelor groups and stuff. But I'll tell you, Jay, it's been really funny to just, position yourself up on a ridge top and, in some true and tried areas that we have and just start wailing on some bugles. And I almost bugle more in the early season. And what happens is these bulls, they hear all the bugling and the cow calling going on. And I really think they think they're missing something. I've had groups of 3 and 4 bulls just come running at me up a hill and never make a noise, never make a sound. But I think the curiosity factor that they have just brings them in,
Yeah, I mean, I think that just the fact that they're missing out and that they're like, well, I know it's about time and whatever's going on up there is I want to be a part of
Right.
it. And so with that scenario, kind of walk me through, would you be up on a ridge, if elk are down below you and then you'd be bugling and carrying on, or are you going to try and be below them, or typically how do you play that out?
That's a really good question. When I first started elk hunting back in the mid 80s, I went to a lot of seminars and I was trying to learn everything I could. And a lot of experts at the time always told me, you always want to call elk downhill. It's so much easier to call elk downhill. But I have to say, in the last 30 years of elk hunting, I would say 80% of the elk I've killed them coming uphill. So I'm a real believer in calling down into ravines, getting up on that ridge, maybe sitting at the top of a little meadow, having a couple decoys out behind me, calling down into a funnel and pulling those bulls up. And what I like to do is place a decoy right at the ridge line there. So it silhouettes, and I'll pop down from the decoy about 40 or 50 yards offline and just start calling. And a lot of times those elk will come out at the bottom of the little meadow that I'm hunting, and they'll look straight up and see that decoy. And man, it just makes a huge difference. Calms them down, and they're actually seeing what they're hearing. And I always kind of coin the term, it gives them a calming effect, that decoy. Because a lot of the challenges when you're calling a bull in is he's coming in looking, and once he gets inside 40 yards, you really only have a couple of minutes to make it happen, But these decoys, they just give you more time because they're actually seeing what they're looking for. And smart bulls, they'll come in and, if they don't see an elk in a few minutes of time, they're getting on edge, and it just makes it more difficult to get the bow back. And it's, those decoys, I believe, are worth their weight in gold. I know we're kind of jumping around, but
No, I mean, that's great stuff. It's a great tip there. And where you guys hunt, I mean, are you just focused on every year trying to kill a bull, or do you actually pass bulls up to, I mean, give me the real scenario of Colorado over the counter situations. I mean, I know you guys want to fill the freezer, but I mean, do you pass bulls up, or do you just shoot a nice bull that comes in and move on to your son or your daughter or whoever else has a tag?
Yeah, I mean, generally in the units that we're hunting, I mean, they're not known for, massive 350-inch bulls or bigger. It's more so just the raghorn satellite bulls and that we're getting into. and filling the freezer is generally our biggest priority on an over-the-counter tag. So generally we'll, it's an either sex tag. We won't shoot a cow on the first day, but if it comes down to it at the end of the season and a cow gives me the opportunity, I will probably take the cow. But as far as waiting or passing on a bull, I'm a little bit better than I think my dad. The first opportunity he gets, he'll generally take.
He's an equal opportunist, huh?
Yeah.
I'll usually pass up a cow for a while, but if I get a shot at a legal bull, I usually go ahead and take it.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I've been trying to sit back and wait a little bit and see if I can find something a little bit bigger. But when it comes down to it, I will shoot a legal bull. So
I'll tell you though, Jay, if I ever was hunting with you, I would just give you all my arrows. And you could just give me the arrow when you see the one that I need to shoot. After seeing a lot of what the videos that you posted stuff, those are some tremendous bulls you guys got.
Yeah, I mean it's honestly Arizona is just a real special place for sure. Guys, I want to ask you a little bit of strategy. You gave me a great tip there with the decoy. So for the guys listening. There's a bunch of listeners that, do over-the-counter Colorado elk every year. Give me some ideas of what kind of country you guys look for as far as terrain, and maybe is there a certain elevation that you find that, if you can get in that sweet spot, or maybe talk a little bit about, maybe some tips that you guys have for guys just finding elk, finding bulls, finding cows, just being able to get in the mix. A lot of people come from out of state. What are some tips you could give them?
Yeah, of course, if you're coming from out of state, it's a little tougher because you can't put any time in scouting and stuff like that. It's a little harder to scout stuff. But, for the Colorado people that are here, I would just recommend really scouting an area, looking for rubs and wallows, sign on the ground, feces, fresh stuff like that, smell even, hunting funnels and corridors where they're going back and forth from their bedding areas and stuff. And one of the great things about learning an area really well is you can find the spots that you want to get into and go into them in the dark and get set up and get ready in those spots as it's getting light. And, it used to be that a lot of guys like to go out in the dark and call and stuff. But, to be honest, I don't do a lot of that anymore just because I've been burned so many times calling in the dark and trying to locate elk where, I'll get into an area that I think is pretty good and all of a sudden I'll try a locating bugle and then I got a 6-point bull standing 10 yards from me in the dark. And I've ruined the spot kind of. So I like to really get ahead and pre-scout stuff and really know and really have a plan going into an area for opening morning and my week hunt, or if I'm taking a week, I'll plan those first 3 or 4 days. These are the areas that I'm going to start out in the morning. And, I try to get into those areas early before it gets light. And then I'll just sit quietly and listen and see if I can hear some stuff going on. And then usually I've got a partner with me, either Thomas or, another friend of mine that we hunt together a lot. And we usually set up about 40 or 50 yards apart, 60 yards apart, put a couple of decoys out behind us. And then we like to start out with like a little barrage of excited cow calls, just like a little small band of cows have transitioned from one shelf to another. And they're really communicating back and forth, really doing a lot of excited mews. And that's kind of what we start out with. And the reason I always tell guys, I don't start out trying to locate and bugle in a spot like that is I'm pretty sure there's going to be some elk in this area, or there's a high probability. And, the last thing I want to do is open up with a big bugle and have a herd bull with, 6 or 7 cows 80 yards from me. And he just says, oh, I've got my cows. I'm just going to take these cows and move off. And and sometimes in some of these high pressure units and stuff, that's what ends up happening. So I always start off with cow calling, and I really do these barrage of cow calls about every 5 to 7 minutes, and I'll stay in a spot, especially a spot that I've really harvested some elk or really seen a lot of sign. I'll stick in a spot about 30 minutes doing these cow calls before I even make a bull sound.
So, Tom, in that situation, so you're staying in a spot 30, 40 minutes, you make some cow calls, nothing, you make some cow calls, nothing, and maybe on the third, 15 minutes into it, down off in the canyon, you hear a small sounding, just a small little, here I am bugle.
Yeah.
Will you cow call right back, or will you go to your small bugle and answer him right back? I'm always curious on guys how they, will you move towards the elk? Will you stay right where you're at? Will you, tell me what you would do, and maybe get both what you would do, Tom, and what you would do, Thomas, and if you have any differing, strategy, then, if you say, oh, I'd do the same thing, then we don't have to hit it. But
Sure.
If you have a differing approach, I'd like to hear it.
So what's worked for me over the years is normally what I do is I get really excited on the cow calls. So the barrage kind of goes up a couple levels. I'll really start hammering some cow calls out there, and it'll be right after he finishes bugling, because I want him to know that these cows are excited that they just heard that bugle. And I'm going to leave the bull sounds in my arsenal until I need them. So I'm going to really go after this bull with cow calls, and I'm going to hit him, maybe even start mixing in a couple estrus sounds here and there, and then just get really excited on the cow calls. And then I'll be quiet for a minute. And if he answers me with another bugle, I'm going to hit him again just with this barrage of cow calls, and I'm going to get more and more excited with him. And a lot of times that bull will be working his way up. I can hear him coming. He's getting closer with the bugles. And, I'm going to keep answering him with that barrage of cow calls until he gets into about 60 to 70 yard range. And then I'm going to start quieting down on my calling, because, boy, they have an uncanny way of pinpointing where a call's coming from. So once they hit that range, if I can see the bull at that distance, then I'm going to just watch him, and I'm going to let him find me. I'm going to let him look for me. I'm not going to make a lot of cow calls. In fact, we'll pretty much shut up on the calls. And I'm hoping at this point he's going to spot the decoy and start walking towards the decoy and walk right in front of me. And the only time I'll call after that point is if he starts losing interest and he starts, maybe turning away a little bit. Normally, I have a video that I did a few years back where a bull was coming in like this, and he got a little bored, and all I did was hit him with one cow call. And boy, he snapped up. He was only about 60 yards, but he was starting to turn and walk away. And I hit him with that one cow call, and he snapped up, tried to pinpoint the call, but looked right past me, saw the decoy, and then just walked right in front of me, and I killed him. So it's really worked well for me, that strategy.
Thomas?
Yeah, I mean, I've tried both strategies. We've tried about everything in the book, I guess. But being younger, one thing I've learned is, I can definitely scale the mountains a little bit better than my dad can.
What's he trying to say, Tom?
I think he's trying to say I'm getting old.
But he can vouch for it too. When he was younger, he tried running all over the mountains, and you end up pushing the bulls more. And a lot of times that's what people are doing. They're running and chasing and trying to get close to them instead of using the calls to bring them to you. So I've tried that, hunting a lot of public land. I hear the bugle. I'm like, oh, I want to be the first one to get to it. But you heard that bugle, you might not have been the only one who heard it in that area. So chances are somebody else is trying to make a move on that bull. So what has worked best for me is what he has been talking about there is, sitting still, waiting for him to come to you, probably for at least half hour, 45 minutes. And if you haven't heard nothing, he's not responding, then maybe I'll try to make a move, and I'll move, another 300 yards or so, depending on how far he was or how far it sounded, and then try to move a little bit closer, set up again, maybe to re-interest him. If he lost interest, and be like, oh, maybe they're moving a little closer. and then I'll sit and wait again and see if he perks his interest again and starts coming back in. But as far as going after him, it's always been pretty tough, just to try to run after him, dealing with the wind for one, and in the mountains in Colorado here, you can't see very far most of the time. Where we hunt a lot of aspen groves, and it's pretty thick, and the bull will have to be, or the elk will have to be, if it's at 80 yards, you might not see it. Even if it's at 40 yards, you might not even see it, depending on the year and how tall the grass is. So it's kind of hard to do in spot and stock on Colorado bulls where we're hunting. We're hunting elevation-wise. What is it up there? It's probably like
8,600, I think.
8,600. So about 8,600 feet. I've hunted at 10,500, 11,000 feet, and the bulls are up there early season. The hotter it is, the higher they're going to be. But once that first snowstorm hits, they're going to start moving down the mountain. And I've been caught up at 11,000 feet and got into the elk first day, and then it'll dump a foot of snow on you, and next thing you know, I can't find them anymore, and they booked it down the mountain. So earlier in the season, definitely a little bit higher. It's a little bit cooler. I've been driving around now, and I'm seeing them above tree line right now. So in 2 weeks, they'll definitely be down a little bit lower. But later in the season, a little bit lower they get. So we usually hunt that third week at about 8,600 feet. So
Okay, good stuff there.
And,
Let's take a quick break here.
Okay.
I have known the owners of the Outdoorsmans in Phoenix for over 20 years. They are the authority on optics and hunting gear. Outdoorsmans is the leading designer and manufacturer of high-quality tripods, mounting accessories, and pack systems for all hunters. Their customer service is the best in the business. Go to outdoorsmans.com or call 1-800-291-8065 and use the J. Scott promo code to receive 10% off any products. PhoneScope is a company that makes custom-molded, precisely engineered smartphone digiscoping adapters. Photographing wildlife has never been easier. It is simple to text photos and videos from your smartphone and share them with your friends. PhoneScope stands behind their product with a 100% money-back guarantee. Get yours now by using the JScott16 promo code and receive 10% discount on all purchases. Check them out at PhoneScope. That's PhoneSkope.com or on Instagram at PhoneScope. What were you going to add to that, Tom?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and then part of my other strategy is because you always get bulls that, they're quick to answer those cows. But all of a sudden you get a bull that's not moving, but he's answering you a lot. So then it's time to make a decision at that point. And usually we'll mull it over and the couple options that we use. Sometimes I'll stay up high on the ridge and I'll send Thomas down there and I'll keep the bull down there bugling, and then Thomas will slip down in there while he's still calling and try to get in close. Once you get in close, you can do a couple soft cow calls, and sometimes he'll think he pulled a cow away from that group that's up on the ridge. And typically, at that point, I've already bugled too. I've kind of exhausted the cow calling. It's not working. So
You've thrown the kitchen sink at him, kind of.
Yeah, you're exactly. I'm going to start copying his bugle, trying to make him mad. Sometimes I'll imitate him as close as I can. If he's grunting twice after his bugle, I'll grunt twice. If all he's doing is grunting, I'll copy that for about 3 or 4 bugles, and then about the 5th bugle, I'll step on him right on top of his bugle. I'll bugle on top of him and try to irritate him that way. So once I've exhausted all of that, then I'll send Thomas down there and or another hunting partner. I'll keep the bull calling and try to let them slip in. And, when that person gets close to the herd, you've got a couple options. You can do that soft cow call, try to bring that bull around with that. Or if you want to get real exciting, you can do a little bugle, but if you do that, you got to be really close to this bull, because most likely a bull like this is going to have cows with it. And, if he hears another bull inside his circle, he doesn't have time to group those cows up and run. He's going to have to defend his honor and these ladies' honor, and he's going to come probably with a fury bugle right in your face, and he's going to come looking for a fight or looking to intimidate you. So that gets pretty exciting too.
Yeah, I love it when it gets like that. Thomas, I want to hear you call. I think you're going to blow on the triple.
Yep.
And maybe step back a little bit from the microphone, and I think we'll get a little bit clearer sounds if you can.
Okay.
And maybe run through, cow calling, bugling, whatever you do, and just tell me what you're doing.
Okay. Yeah. This is our triple reeds called Mile High Warrior. So I'll step back here and I'll do some cow calls, just kind of a situation that we would do hunting in the woods. So I'll go ahead and step back here.
And Thomas, is this your call that this your go-to call that you pretty much use the whole time?
Yeah, we just made this triple reed, about a year ago?
Yeah.
Made it about a year ago, and I've really kind of abandoned, I shouldn't say abandoned the others, but I've really taken a liking to this triple reed here. I can just get a wide range of calls. I can get the cow-calf communications. I can rip on the bugle with it. I can do a spike bugle. I can do the high locator. Just about everything I need to, I've been able to do with it. And heck, I've turkey hunted with it this year too. So it's.
And one question with that triple reed. So you've got 3 pieces of latex. When the call is sounding its best, are all 3 pieces of triple latex basically one? Have you had it in your mouth enough, or is it like a turkey call? You know how they have reed separators? In my mind, those double and triple, when you can actually get the 3 reeds to all kind of blend as one, that's for me when they sound the best. When the reeds are separated and not when they're stuck together is when they sound the best. When they get separated, for me, they get more cracky, and I'm just curious what both of you think about that.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that one. When they get separated, it's, they'll get like a bubble in between them or something like that, and it'll definitely kind of give you a crack noise, in a bugle or a cow call. So ours are all together. I'll take a new one out of the package and I'll get it a little wet, try to get some spit or something between the latexes so that way they can form together and basically become one.
Okay, so in other words, as soon as you pull them out of the package, it takes on when you have multiple reeds, for the listeners out there in general, it takes a little while for them maybe to call and for it to dry, and then the next day call and dry, maybe 3 or 4 days for it to really get sounding really good.
Yeah, it's, I think a little for the average caller, I would say so. For me, and since they are our calls, I can take it right out of the package and it'll, sound great and it'll be fine. But they do take a little bit. The more layers of latex, definitely, if you're not used to it, it does take a little longer to learn how to use it. But I think the benefits are a lot better for it.
Sounds good. Well, why don't you run through some calls here?
All right. So with the triple reed, as you can tell, you can get really quiet with it, which is very handy when the bull you're hunting or the elk you're hunting is in close. But you can also get really loud with it if you need to reach out there and, locate them. Excuse me.
Good stuff. Let's hear some bugling.
All right, so we'll do some bugling here. I'll do anything from a little spike call to a big bull. So those Arizona
Let's hear
bulls,
it.
not the Colorado.
If you blew that, they might run to the next county.
Yeah, that's a good point there. Definitely, you don't want to sound like the biggest, baddest bull. Definitely want to sound like management bull or a satellite bull that has cows, because then it'll kind of piss off the big bull that he has his girls. So
If you're in Colorado, keep the lip balls to a minimum.
Exactly.
yeah, I don't think I've ever done one unless you're hunting the national park or up a dinosaur park or something,
Reel game calls featuring the elk reel. Reel Game Calls makes innovative, realistic, and easy-to-master calls using their proprietary, revolutionary design. They are located and manufactured in Gypsum, Colorado. Their calls were designed and battle-tested on some of the hardest hunted terrain on Earth. Check out elkreel.com. Use the promo code JScott and receive a 20% discount on all purchases. Go to www.elkreel.com.
So that last one is more of the one that we'll do.
You can see why you're a 6-time world champion. I noticed that your chuckles. How would you describe to someone that's listening to get that, that ape-like sound? I don't know what you would call it, but it's how do you get that bounce back? How would you describe that?
Well, I was basically going to say just kind of what you did there, and kind of a lot of it comes from your voice, kind of making that ape noise. I mean, it sounds pretty ridiculous, but if you weren't to do it without the reed in your mouth, I mean,
Right.
Just be like just like that in the tube there. And like my dad was talking about earlier too, at the tube, having, I think, those 2 chambers in there and that rubber gasket in the middle definitely helps give you the back pressure on it, kind of gives you that second echo. But yeah, I mean, basically it comes from your gut. You just got to get down deep and just make, a monkey noise, basically.
I tell people sometimes to actually not do it just like you did. Don't do it with the call in your mouth and get that.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
until you can get that, and then once you get that, then put the call in and mess with it.
Exactly.
That's the way I teach that too, and a lot of it, everything's so important. The breathing, even the breathing inside the tube when you're taking a breath between each grunt, all of that is a realistic sound that bulls make. So, and you want to end that high pitch coming off of the high pitch grunt with a kind of coming from your diaphragm, kind of just and in the tube it just sounds incredible. If you can, the hardest part for guys though is timing the sound that comes from the reed with the sound that comes from your diaphragm.
Yeah.
And it's all just timing and practice, really.
For sure.
It's almost like a hiccup,
Yeah, for sure. Would there be any time that you guys would I had Jason Phelps on. I've had some other guys on that are real big buglers. And is there ever a time when, timing of the season or just time of day that a bull bugles, you're just going to bugle back? He bugles, you bugle back, and just back and forth until he comes in? Or is that typically not your strategy?
That's typically not our strategy in the areas we were hunting, but I would probably change my strategy if I was hunting in an area that was a little bit more high quality bulls that weren't going to get intimidated as much.
A little bit more aggressive, less pressure.
Yeah.
So if you hiked up into a basin in the, say, the 23rd or 4th of September.
Uh-huh.
And let's say you went up there and there's 6 or 8 bulls and they're bugling and they're getting after it and they're chuckling and they're raking and you hear it, you would automatically say, okay, that will allow me to step up and be more aggressive, or will you still stay with, your cow calling and try and sweet talk them as opposed to getting in their face? Because I know there's a lot of guys that, and everybody's strategy is different, and everybody, gets to a certain level and they're successful at what they do. And there's, 10 ways to skin a cat. But for me, sweet talking and cow calling has always worked better. But there's guys that will argue with me till I'm blue in the face, and they'll say, we don't even cow call at all. We bugle and go back and forth and, have great success. You think that's a function of older age class bulls and, maybe not as pressured elk, or do you just think it's a different part of the country?
I think both, honestly. I mean, different part of the country, they act a little bit different. Even in Colorado, different parts of Colorado, the elk are a little different. It's the mountains are different, the terrain is different. But like you're saying, around like the 24th of September, and they're all ripping into it, and I might try to. I don't know. We always sweet talk. I think it's still. I agree with you on that one. I mean, if you think about a bull who's trying to get as much ladies as he can, he hears like a raghorn bull that's got a bunch of ladies. Chances are he's going to want to come kick his butt and take his girls. So
I kind of agree with you too, Jay. My philosophy is I'm going to try everything I can to sweet talk that bull in. I'm going to hit him with some really sexy estrus calls and stuff like that. And my theory is I can always try bugling at him later. I haven't hardly ever pushed a bull off or scared a bull with cow calls. So I always try to use those cow calls first and then kind of go to the bugling as a well, I won't say last resort, but I always try to push those cow calls up first and really try to get those to work for me.
Sure. And I heard you even saying that, you start your sequence out with cow calling and try and locate. Thomas, I've got a question for you. Do you have a specific bugle? Let's say you've hiked up a ridge, you're up on a ridge, it's just breaking day, you've tried a few cow calls, nothing answered. Is there one particular bugle that you'll say that I'll go to this, or will you kind of bugle a few different times and try and sound like a bull wound up, or will you have kind of a high locator? What's your thought on that?
Yeah, if I'm striking out, and the past few years I've been trying to explore some new areas around, and so I've been doing a lot of hiking and stuff like that. So I'll get up on top of a ridge if my setups in the morning were unsuccessful, and by that time it's probably like 9:30, 10 o'clock, so it's kind of winding down a little bit, and I'll get up on a ridge and just kind of generally I'll just do a high locator. It'll be 1 or 2 notes. Just try to carry that one note as long as you can.
Let me hear that.
Okay.
Something.
Just something that can reach out there and go out to the ridge. Maybe even a little bit longer than that. That was kind of a short one there. Sorry about that. But just something that's high.
If a bull, so you're up on a ridge and you did that, and all of a sudden across the drainage, a bull bugles about the same response, just kind of an answer. Will you then at that point, will you kind of try and spot him with your glasses, or will you kind of just sit there and see if he fires off again? Or will you say, okay, he's across a drainage, he's going to have to come quite a ways. What will you do then? Will you just kind of let him make the next move, or will you bugle back at him?
Well, generally in the areas where I've been hunting and where we hunt, glassing really isn't a huge option. It's pretty thick trees and we can't see much. So depending on how far the bugle was, first thing I would do is check the wind. Wind is definitely the biggest factor in any hunting. I don't care, how much scent gear or whatever you have on. If the wind's wrong, the wind's wrong, in my opinion. So the first thing I do is kind of assess the wind and decide whether I'm in a good spot or not. If I have time, if he answered and he was right on top of us like we had last year, that happened to us once, and we didn't really have any time. We had to just sit and hope that he came in, and he did, and we just didn't get an opportunity on him. But so it all depends on how far he is, what the wind is. If he's a pretty good distance away, I might try to close 100 yards or something, and then let out a few cow calls, and I'll start with the cow calls again and see if he responds. If he doesn't respond, then maybe, I'll throw out a bugle again just because it worked the last time. So maybe it'll provoke him to talk again, and I can see if either he's getting closer or if he's getting further, or even if it's a hunter.
Yeah, and I would
assume that a fair amount.
We call in a lot of hunters, so
I would assume that if you got a bull bugling, that the last thing you really want to do is make them bugle a whole lot. You want to kind of get them in and get them killed before you have 16 other guys right on top of you.
Exactly. Yeah, we've been working elk, and next thing you know, during muzzleloader season or something, we'll be working a bull, and all of a sudden you just hear a shot like 100 yards away from you, and you're like, well, here goes that hunt. And so,
what would you guys say, over the years, what would you say the average distance of your bow shots are in your country that you hunt?
I don't think we've shot over 40 yards.
No, I've never shot over 40 yards on an elk. Most elk I've killed have been between 20 and 30 yards.
Okay, and some advice to the listeners out there: when an elk's coming in, Tom, he's committed to the decoy. He's going to walk right past you. Do you stop them every time? Do you let them walk? Do you shoot if they're close enough? Do you shoot them walking? Give me some advice there.
Yeah. So, the beautiful thing about mastering the diaphragm read is it's hands free, and which is just incredible for incredible tool for the bow hunter. So I always had that reed in my mouth, 8 hours a day when I'm trumping through the woods. And, but as that bull's coming in, the first thing I try to do, normally if I have time, I'll get my rangefinder out and I'll hit a couple specific trees that are out there in front of me, ones that really stick out, try to figure out what's 20, what's 30, what's 40, and then I can put the rangefinder away. I don't have to touch that again. So I got a bull coming in. When he hits if he's coming at a pretty good pace, when he hits about 50 yards, I'm going to draw my bow back. And that way there's not a lot of movement when he's in close. And then I'm just going to hold. And then typically I'm going to wait for him to get within that 30-yard range. If I feel like he's going to continue to come in at 30 yards, I'll continue to let him walk. But as soon as he hits that 20-yard range, I'll usually just let out a little cow mew, and it'll stop him, and then I'll just center the pin on him and hit him.
To add to that, one thing we've done in the past that kind of almost blew a shot a time or two is we kind of try to decide who the shooter is when you're hunting with somebody. Like this setup, all right, Dad, this is yours. The next setup is mine. And so I'll sit a little bit further back than my dad, even kind of near the decoy. And let's say he's hunting, he's the one with the shot, so he'll shut up on the calls. And then I'll let out a few here and there just to give the bull reassurance that, there is a cow there. Hey, look at the decoy. But once you feel as the caller that the bull is close enough for a shot, that's when you as the caller kind of let the hunter take over. Because we've in the past, I've had a bull, it was at like 55 yards and my dad thought it was at like 30. And so he tried to stop the bull and the bull stopped, and I didn't even have my bow pulled back. And, I wasn't ready for the shot at all. So that's one key thing to keep in mind when you're hunting with other people is the shooter is the one who stops the animal in our case. Just because you don't know if they have a clear shot, you don't know what their lanes look like. So that's definitely one thing we've done in the past where the caller ended up stopping the bull and it was behind a tree or it wasn't close enough or something like that.
Jay, he always tells this story, and I'm always the bad guy in it, but he still killed the bull. So
That's actually a great tip,
It,
and it's something to mention to always have good communication with whoever you're hunting with, so that you don't run into those situations because it could mean having meat in the freezer or not, and so that's a great tip. Guys, when you're drawing down and drawing on a bull and looking through your peep, I know we've all been there before. I mean, I shot at a bull one time and I don't even know that I looked through my peep and centered it, centered my pin, and then I shot and I don't even know where my arrow went. So those things happen, I think, with more experience. What would you guys say, speaking from experience, how do you get yourself settled down, and what kind of checklist do you go through to make sure to dial in and make the shot?
It's a good question. Because I've been there too. It's so exciting you don't even know. Your adrenaline is going so much. It's tough to keep it settled down. But the biggest thing for me, just remembering to breathe
Yeah.
and trying to keep your shakes down to a minimum. Because I mean, bow hunting, you got to stand steady. And with that bull within 20 yards, man, sometimes it can get pretty intense. And um, just keeping your eye on the kill spot. Once you know it's a legal bull, don't worry about the antlers, how big it is, whatever. Just keep your eye on the prize and stay focused on where you want to hit, and that definitely helps me. And then after you release the arrow, make sure you got a good follow through, and you try your hardest to watch that arrow. And Luminox kind of help with that now. In Colorado, they finally legalized it, so you can use Luminox now. So that'll definitely help you. And one thing we do after the shot is make noise, like don't jump up and start yelling and screaming, I shot it. But make noise. What I mean by that is, your caller or you let out some cow calls and let out a bugle right after the shot, because chances are, I mean, they don't know it just happened. And if you made a good shot, you don't want them to run far. Like, the closer the better, obviously. So you let out that bugle, and I mean, I'd say 7 out of 10 times we have them stop and we watch them die right in front of us.
yeah,
So
it works.
For sure.
One of the
Sure.
Just to add a little bit to that, Jay, I think a big part of this is just practice outside of that situation. Shoot arrows all summer long through your bow. Get to know your weapon. Get just so that it is second nature. Because sometimes you're right. I mean, you try to relive the moment, and you're like, did I even look through my peep? But if you've practiced enough and you've done everything right, it just helps you so much more. A lot of times it's second nature. It all happens so fast, but you did everything right because you've been shooting hundreds and hundreds of arrows all summer. And, I think that's a huge part of it. And, when you're out there on the ranges and stuff, don't just stop in front of the target and stand there and shoot, like leisurely and stuff. Do things that are gonna help you in the field. Shoot sitting down, pull your bow back behind a bush and hold it for 20 or 30 seconds, and then ease out from behind the bush and let an arrow fly at your target. Practice like real live situations so it helps you when you're in the woods. Very rarely do you get to just stand up and pull an arrow back,
perfect form.
Point at the moon and pull an arrow back, pull your bow down, and practice drawing straight back and as little movement as possible, and just really put the practice in on the range. And I think it'll really help you in those high intense situations.
Yeah, and for me, it seems like the more that I focus on my my routine on the range, and that's drawing back, putting the tip of my nose right on the string,
Yep.
then going to my peep and centering my pins and my sight housing, having that all one, and then going for my target. And I think, Thomas, you said something there that's pretty cool that has helped me too, and that's focus on your spot. Even when you're drawing, you're looking at where you're trying to hit that bull. Then you go through your routine, and as you start, centering your pin and looking, then you're just looking for that spot. But if you can kind of stay on that spot when all of that's going on, that's what helps me. And, just kind of focus, try and tune everything else out, and really go through your routine and systematically, if you just draw back and you're, the first thing I do is draw back, put the string on my nose, then I'm looking through my peep, then I'm centering my pins. At least I'm that much closer to probably making a better shot than, that I had those 3 bulls came in, one of the first elk hunts I ever went on, and they came in. It was our first afternoon out. It was in Colorado, and some other guys that I went with, they went one way. I'm by myself. I mean, it's one of those perfect situations. Look, there's 3 bulls. They're walking down a trail. They come up to 20 yards. I don't even know where the arrow went. I mean, I don't even know that I looked through the peep. So it's, until you make yourself go to your routine, I think, it can happen. I've had clients that, what happened?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I shot, but I don't know, so it happens to everybody.
Sure.
Guys, it's been awesome having you on. I want to give you guys a chance to let the listeners know how they can find you, your website, social media, and what have you, if you would.
Sure. Our website is www.milehigh gamecalls.com. And you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Mile High Note Game Calls.
Awesome. I noticed you've been doing some fishing, Thomas, this summer.
Yeah, I've been traveling quite a bit for work, actually, up by Steamboat, and so I've been fishing up there, and I've been doing pretty good. I did some fishing. I actually went to New Zealand too, and I did some fishing there, and it's been a pretty great year. I went and stag hunting there and got a nice stag, and it was pretty phenomenal.
Was it during the roar?
It was, but we were caught right at the end of it, and the roar was pretty much over. So unfortunately, we didn't get to hear the roar, and we just saw one brief fight between 2 big bulls. But they're pretty aggressive animals, that's for sure. One bull got his butt kicked, and he was bleeding all over. So it was pretty cool to watch. But unfortunately, we didn't get to catch the roar. So that was the only bad part. But
New Zealand's an amazing country.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah, the fishing and hunting opportunities there are awesome, and it's a great country. If the listeners ever get a chance to get to New Zealand, it's one of my favorite places. My wife and I spent 2 weeks there on our honeymoon and fished, I think, 9 days, and it just the country's so clean.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of junk around. It's just a really neat spot. So that's cool that you got to enjoy that. Well, guys, I want to wish you the best. Hunting season's around the corner. I'll be watching on your social media to see how you guys did, and saw you had a great turkey season, and it's always fun catching up with you guys. And I guess until I talk to you, God bless, and knock down a couple bulls this year.
All right, Jay, thank you very much, and you too. Good luck with your hunts, and it was a pleasure being on your show today.
Sounds good, guys. Have a great day. Okay, take care.
All right, bye-bye.